On today's show, the Cavs take down the Sixers with what I would call a professional effort on Monday night. We'll discuss that, plus James Harden's takeover in the third quarter. That's all straight ahead on this edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everybody. My name is Danny Cunningham, and I cover the Cleveland Cavaliers over at my Substack, The Inside Shot. And you're listening to another edition of Locked On Cavs, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in all of America. You can find this show and any other Locked On podcast anywhere you get them. That's Apple, that's Spotify, that's on YouTube as well. And if you're watching right now, please do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button and click that notification bell if you have not already as we get started here. And make sure that you are subscribed wherever you might be listening to this show. Today's edition of Locked On Cavs brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Head to FanDuel.com to get started today. That is FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. On today's show, we'll talk about the Cavs taking down the Philadelphia 76ers, James Harden's third quarter takeover of this game, some role players that stood out to me, and the way that I think the playoff rotation is starting to shape up. But the Cavs ultimately get a 115-101 win over the Philadelphia 76ers on Monday evening inside Rocket Arena. And this was a game that was not as close as the final score might indicate. The Cavs led by as many as 25 points, did not think that they really did anything well in the fourth quarter. They gave up 35 points in the fourth quarter. The deep bench reserves got outscored by 8 points in the final 4 minutes of this game. That certainly colors the final score. And I did think too that at the start of the fourth quarter, like the defensive effort was not the same as it was earlier on in this game. And I don't want to focus on that because ultimately, like, this was a good night for the Cavs, where we have seen this team so many times throughout this season where they have seen an undermanned team come into Rocket Arena. Think back to that Warriors game, the win over the Memphis Grizzlies. They have had a lot of these games where they'll play with their food. And sometimes they were able to find a way to get a win. And other times, like that game against the Golden State Warriors, it's an ugly, embarrassing loss. And they avoided that. And that's ultimately, I think, the thing that matters most is that, yes, Philly didn't have Joel Embiid. They didn't have Tyrese Maxey, no VJ Edgecombe, Paul George still suspended. Like, all of those things are true, but we have seen the Cavs stumble in this situation multiple times this year. So I do think that first and foremost, getting a win is what matters. I don't think that there's a ton to read into. It's like, yeah, we learned a ton about who the Cavs are because of a win over a team that could be in the playoffs. Like, that doesn't apply to this. And I want to be clear about that, but that doesn't mean nothing from this game matters. I don't think that there should be sweeping takeaways from this particular game, considering who they played. But ultimately, like, I do think the Cavs deserve at least a little credit for showing up and taking care of business. Like, when I think of this game, I think of, okay, the Cavs got off to a rough start. And offensively, I think they missed their first 8 threes. And I think everybody was having flashbacks to Sunday when they went 2 of 22 from beyond the arc against the Celtics in the first half. I think people were having flashbacks, and they were probably taking a few too many threes early on in this game. And, you know, that's maybe a different discussion for tomorrow. But they figured things out. And I didn't think that they had the best energy early in this game. And that's part of the reason why I do think that there was maybe a little cause for concern the first stint that the starters played. But then that turned around. Then the Cavs were able to, instead of the way that we have seen them earlier in the season, where they would wait until 6 minutes left in the third quarter to find the required energy, the Cavs were able to turn that switch on much earlier in this game. It wasn't there from the opening tip-off. That was clear. But they didn't drag their feet. They didn't wait forever. They took care of business. And that's why I call this a professional win. Now, the thing to me that stood out the most, and might be the thing that I look at and say, this is the thing that needs to translate from this game into higher stakes situations, is what James Harden did in the third quarter of this game. Because I think that stretch in the third quarter that James played from around the 10.5-minute mark until he subbed out was maybe the best stint that James has played wearing a Cavs uniform so far. So over that stretch, Harden either scored or assisted on 20 straight points for the Cavs. So he started off, he scored 9 straight points. He was on a 7-0 run. The Sixers got a bucket on an Evan Mobley goaltend, which I'm not sure was the correct call. They showed the replay a couple of times in the building. It did look like the ball may have been at its apex when Mobley got a fingertip on it. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, but I'm not sure that was the correct call. But Harden scored 9 straight Cavs points. He hit a 3 or hit a mid-range, hit a 3, hit what was initially another 3 and was ultimately overturned upon video review into a 2-pointer, got to the free throw line for 2 more points. And then because Philly's defensive attention really started to shift, and Nick Nurse at no point during this thought it was a good idea to call a timeout. Maybe he doesn't think James Harden is a needle mover either, the way that Daryl Morey apparently doesn't think that was the case. But I thought this was very much a needle moving type of performance in the third quarter from James Harden. But then Harden really went into distributor mode, and it was not him getting cheap assists. These were shots that he was creating because he found 3 open threes, found Evan Mobley for a dunk. Like it was. And they were excellent passes. And one of the things that Dean Wade said after this game in the locker room was that there are these passes that James is capable of making. And this was, sort of a celebratory night for James Harden. He crossed the 29,000 point threshold, which only 9 guys in NBA history have done. It's a really impressive thing. It speaks to his longevity. It speaks to how incredible of a career he has had. And that was part of this conversation, but it's also how good of a passer he is. And this is what needs to translate. The scoring needs to translate to the postseason, but the passing and the way that he's able to set guys up is something that we need to see from the Cavs when the postseason arrives. And I don't doubt, I know that there is the iffy track record for James in the postseason. I don't doubt for a second his ability to create looks for others in the postseason. I have zero doubt that that's going to translate to the middle of May and maybe into June for the Cavs. And that is what they ultimately need, because some of these passes that he was finding, Dean Wade for open threes, Keon Ellis for open threes, Jalen Tyson for open threes, they're just passes that very few guys in Cavs history have the ability to make. I'm talking LeBron, maybe Ricky Rubio, maybe Darius Garland, but I don't think so. And a lot of it has to do with the size that James has, because he can throw passes at different angles than I think a lot of the great passers can, because he's 6'5". He's an oversized guard, if you will. And watching through that stretch of basketball where he just had complete control of the game, whether it was the scoring early on in that stretch, whether it was the ability to create excellent looks. It's not as if he's getting assists because guys are knocking down contested threes. He was creating wide open shots, because if you go back and watch the 4 assists that he had after the 4 possessions that he scored on, which were 3 made baskets and a trip to the free throw line. If you go back and watch the assists that he made, these are not tough buckets for his teammates. Now, ultimately, those guys need to go out there and knock down shots, which is something they did not do on Sunday against Boston, because Harden certainly could have had more assists than he had in that game against the Celtics on Sunday afternoon. But he was putting the basketball exactly where it needed to be, when it needed to be there. I don't think that his teammates could have asked for better passes from him. And that is the type of thing that the Cavs are going to need in the postseason. They're going to need their role players to hit shots. And I do want to talk about Keon Ellis. I want to talk about Dean Wade coming up in the next segment, because I think those two are very important to who the Cavs are. But they're going to need James to create these looks. And what we saw, and I get it, this was not a good Philadelphia 76ers team. I know, by record, the Sixers are 34-30, and this is a win over a 500 team. And there are reasons to be happy about that. And it's something that helps the Cavs in the standings, certainly. But this was not a good Sixers team. Like I said, they did not have Joel Embiid. They did not have Tyrese Maxey. Paul George still suspended. PJ Edgecombe sat out this game. This was a bad Sixers team, and the Cavs handled their business, which is the most important thing. But I don't doubt that this type of performance from James is very repeatable. Now, is he going to shoot the way that he did over that stretch? Yeah, at times he's going to miss the shots. Like, that's the way the world works. But the passing to me just stood out. It was the control of which he had over the basketball game is so important, because when I think of what happened last year to the Cavs in the postseason against the Pacers, even in the game they won, even in game 3, it didn't often feel like the Cavs were in control. Throughout all 5 of those games, it felt like the Pacers were the ones that imprinted their style on the series, that they were the forceful ones. And it hasn't been 100% of the time, but it does feel like most of the time that James is on the floor for the Cavs are the ones that are imposing their will. And that wasn't the case enough against Boston on Sunday afternoon. And I get it. Like, that was the most important game. That was the most important regular season game the Cavs will play with James Harden on the roster this year. It was. They don't have a game left on the schedule that is even close to that in terms of importance. I don't think that they're going to be, and they're not going to win all of their remaining games, but they're not going to be tested the way they were against the Celtics the rest of the regular season. But I do think that what we saw from James Harden on Monday night, with the way that he was able to control the basketball game, the way he was able to score, the way he was able to get to the free throw line 6 times, the way that he was able to set up his teammates in the fashion that he was. And like, he only had 5 assists in this game. He could have had more. Like I said, the Cavs in the first quarter missed their first 8 3-pointers. A few of those would have been James Harden assists. I believe a couple of them were threes that James Harden missed. Donovan Mitchell missed a couple. Like, the Cavs just did not shoot the ball well at the start of this game. And like I said earlier, I didn't think their energy for the first 5 or 6 minutes was all that great. And then they were able to step on the gas, and that's all that mattered. But watching what James Harden did, and maybe it was because it was against Philly, and Daryl Morey said that he didn't see any teams in the East make a needle-moving trade, which is wild to say from a team that is, in all likelihood, going to end up at the play-in and go nowhere when the postseason arrives. But this was, without a doubt, in my opinion, a needle-moving performance from James Harden. I was really impressed, and that is the exact type of game. They don't need James to go out and score 35 a night in the playoffs, the way that other teams have had in the past, where he has been such a focal point offensively. If James Harden, if you could replicate this game that James Harden played for the Cavs in the postseason, they're going to be awfully difficult to beat. And I see no reason why that can't be the case. Now, I mentioned there were some important role player performances. Dean Wade was one of them. Keon Ellis was another one of them. I think what we saw from those guys is a little bit different than what we've seen. And I think it's important the Cavs try and draw more of that out of them. We'll talk about it next right here on Locked On Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by Game Time. There is nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, well, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. Puts the advantage back where it belongs with you, the fan. You can pull up the Game Time app, you can pick an upcoming NBA game, and you can have tickets locked in within minutes. One of my favorite things, the all-in price up front. I don't want to be bombarded at the last minute with taxes, fees. I don't know what this is for. Why is this a different price than what I thought it was going to be? With Game Time, you don't have to deal with that. They have no surprise fees at checkout. And another feature I love is that you can see the view from your seat before you are buying. You want to know what half court's going to look like? You want to know what the Cavs bench is going to look like? Game Time will show you exactly what the view from your seat is going to be to help make the decision even easier. You can get great last minute options too, with NBA tickets showing up at solid prices the closer you get to tip off. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON, that is LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDON for $20 off that first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Thank you again for making this edition of Locked On Cavs your first watch on YouTube or your first listen anywhere you might get your podcast. And if you are an everydayer what you need to do. Check out the Locked On Cavs Everyday Air Club. If you've been thinking about joining, now's the time, because you get ad-free shows and access to the group chat on Discord. Plus, if you're signed up before the NCAA tournament tips off, you can get into the Everyday Air Club bracket pool on Discord for a chance to win Locked On merch. Should be a lot of fun. And right now, use the code MARCH, that's MARCH, to get your first month for free. So head to the link in the show notes if you would like to learn more. The Cavs got great performances in this game from a couple of different role players. And the two that stood out to me were Keon Ellis and Dean Wade. And I'm going to talk about Keon Ellis first, because I think that this was probably the most impactful offensive game that he's played. I don't think it's the most impactful defensive game that he's played. I will say, though, the fact that he was a game high plus 25 in the 25 minutes he played, it felt like it. The Cavs felt like a much better team when Keon Ellis was on the floor. And I do think, like I talked about the energy shifting earlier and the Cavs not having the best energy to start this game. When Keon Ellis got onto the floor, that's sort of when that switch flipped. That's when the Cavs looked like a professional basketball team, a team that was not there to screw around on Monday night. And I'm not saying that Keon Ellis deserves all the credit for that, but he deserves some of the credit for that. So his final line, like I said, played 25 minutes, scored 19 points on 5 of 9 shooting, was 4 of 7 from beyond the arc, 5 of 7 at the free throw line, grabbed a couple of rebounds, also had a steal, plus 25 in 25 minutes. And the 3-point, again, made 4 3-pointers. That's awesome. The Cavs need Keon Ellis to do that. He's a career 40% 3-point shooter. He's a good 3-point shooter. Just like Dean Wade, the Cavs need him to be a willing 3-point shooter. Some of those looks were awesome ones. Like he had one that Dean Wade got an assist on. It was a cross-court pass to an open Keon Ellis. I believe it was in the right corner, maybe right wing. Like it was sort of near the break in the 3-point line. And he's got to knock down that shot. Like he has to consistently make that wide open 3-pointer from a very, very efficient spot on the floor. But to me, this was not, oh, Keon had a good game because he hit threes. Like that's not what this was. What stood out to me was his ability to put the ball on the floor in a way that we've not necessarily seen him do all that frequently. Because I do think, and I think at this point he's played 12 games so far or something, a number near that. But I think that when he has put the ball on the deck, I don't want to say like he's dribbled for no purpose or no reason, but I don't think that he's been super forceful, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know that there has been enough intent behind him putting the ball on the floor. Like, it's almost when he's dribbling, at times it can feel like he's just trying to dribble the basketball to get it into somebody else's hands rather than put pressure on the defense. Sometimes when that's late in the shot clock, it has led to some bad possession, and maybe not led to, but has been the culmination of a bad possession for the Cavs on the offensive end of the floor. But to me, that was not the case. And maybe it was because this was against a lower level of competition, and the Sixers being who the Sixers were on Monday night. But he dribbled with a purpose. He got into the lane. He got to the free throw line. He knocked down a couple of floaters. Like, he looked like a much more complete offensive player than what we have seen from him in a Cavs uniform. And that, to me, the Cavs don't need Keon Ellis to go out and score 19 points in the playoffs. That's not what I'm saying. But they need him to play with the aggressive mindset on the offensive floor that he showcased in this game on Monday night. That is what the Cavs need him to do. Is he going to hit 4 threes every game? No, he's not. Like, that's just not what Keon Ellis is going to be. That's not, role players are role players because you can't expect all of them to go out and score 19 points a game, right? Like, Sam Merrill has not had a good couple of games. He scored 2 points in this one, 1 of 6 from the floor, missed all 5 threes that he took after going 1 of 7 against the Celtics in a bit of a shooting slump. Don't think it's that big of a deal, but he's a role player. If Donovan Mitchell had the 2 games that Sam Merrill has had, it would be a really big deal. But because Sam is a role player, it's just a different category of expectations. And Keon Ellis is in that bucket. Dean Wade is in that bucket. Jalen Tyson right now is in that bucket. That's what those guys are. And you need I think like 2 of them to hit on any given night. And if that happens, you feel really good about your chances. If you're the Cavs, given who their role players are and given the fact that they have so much star power, they don't necessarily need a ton from their role players every single night. But I do think that if they can get this type of aggressive mindset and this type of aggressive play out of somebody like Keon Ellis, out of somebody like Dean Wade, out of Jalen Tyson, they're going to be much better off for it. Out of Dennis Schroeder, another guy I haven't mentioned yet, and he didn't have a great game in this one, but that's not what the Cavs need. I do think they need Keon to be aggressive. They need him to be forceful offensively. And I think that this game can serve as one that is a confidence boost for him and something that you hope, if you're the Cavs, you hope that he can carry this over to Wednesday night against Orlando, and then Friday night against Dallas, and then Sunday afternoon against Dallas. Like, can this be something? And we've seen Keon have other good offensive games. Like, he had a good game in Milwaukee in the game that he actually fractured his finger in. But I think this has very clearly been the best he's looked offensively since he's had that finger issue. And I think that that is a step in the right direction. That is something that the Cavs should be happy about. The other role player that I think is worth talking about is Dean Wade in this one. So Dean was in the starting lineup, and he's going to continue to be in the starting lineup. Like, when the Cavs are fully healthy, Dean Wade is going to be their starting small forward. Kenny Atkinson basically said as much. I don't remember if it was before the game or after the game, but during one of his press conferences on Monday night, he said as much. Like, Dean Wade's going to be the starting small forward, and I would be very surprised if that changes. But he started the game at power forward because the Cavs starting lineup on Monday was the same as it was on Sunday. It had Harden, Donovan Mitchell, Sam Merrill, Dean Wade, Evan Mobley. So Dean starts at power forward. But he actually played most of his minutes in this game at center. So he started both halves at power forward, and then he was basically the center for the rest of the minutes that he played. And when the Cavs don't have Jared Allen, I think this is a little bit easier to do. And I don't know how much this is going to translate to the postseason, but it has been really, really good for the Cavs lately. So Dean has played center. It's a very small sample size, and everything with this new version of the Cavs is a small sample size. So these numbers need to be taken with a grain of salt. And I don't have the numbers from Monday's game, but the Cavs were successful with Dean on the floor. He was a plus 16, and that's, again, with the starting groups not necessarily playing all that well. So they played better in the third quarter together than they did the first quarter. But like the first quarter, the starters, I believe, got outscored in their first stint together. But he was a plus 16 in 20 minutes, had 13 points, had 10 rebounds. 4 of them were offensive rebounds, had 2 assists, blocked a shot, hit 3 threes. When the Cavs put him at center, post trade deadline. So basically what I did to filter this out, I use Cleaning the Glass for these numbers, and I put Dean Wade at center, DeAndre Hunter not on the floor, Lonzo Ball not on the floor, Darius Garland not on the floor. So there might be a few possessions where that was true prior to the trade deadline, but that filters out most of it. So there are 47 possessions entering Monday. It's a teeny sample size. 47 possessions of which Dean Wade has been at center with guys that are no longer on the roster, also not on the floor. Because if those guys are on the floor, the numbers look much different, but those numbers are not necessarily worth basing things on because those lineups don't exist anymore, right? But with Dean Wade at center, post-trade deadline, the Cavs have an offensive rating of 140 and a defensive rating of 89. That is incredible stuff. Now, how sustainable is it? I don't know. How much do we see this in the postseason? I don't know, because the thinking would be, well, the Cavs are going to have one of Jared Allen or Evan Mobley on the floor almost at all times because those two are really, really good players. And prior to Jared being out with this knee injury, he was playing at, I think, the highest level of his career. And I think James Harden is going to just be remarkable for him. And Evan Mobley is still, and he played 28 minutes, and I think it was a really good sign. He played both legs of a back-to-back, but he is still working his way back from a calf injury. And I did not think Evan was great in this game. I thought he was fine. I thought his touch was a little bit off. And that just sort of is what it is. But the Cavs have discovered this weapon of being able to use Dean Wade in some smaller lineups, because like there was a lineup where Craig Porter Jr. was essentially the power forward. How sustainable is that? I don't know, but they have found something that works. And Dean enjoys playing center. It's not something the Cavs can ask him to go out and do for 20 minutes a night. but can they get away with it for 3 minutes to try and maybe expand a lead, and they can get enough stops because it's a very switchable thing. And I think that now having James Harden out there with him when he's in some of those center moments, it makes the Cavs defensively better. Because is Harden a great defender? No, he's not. But the Cavs can switch 1 through 5 there. And that's not something they've been able to do in Dean Wade at center lineups for the most part before. So I do think that is something that's just worth thinking about here, is that the Cavs have discovered this weapon. Again, I don't know how translatable it's going to be for the postseason, but for right now, it's working, and it is working really, really well. Kenny Atkinson said something on Tuesday night about the playoff rotation, and it got me thinking about what could it look like, because the Cavs might have too many guys for not enough spots. We need to discuss it next right here on Locked on Cavs. But first, today's show is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade, because Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person, and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. So head to turbotax.com/local. That's TurboTax, TurboTax.com/local, LOCAL, to find a store near you and book your appointment today. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. College basketball nonstop. Was watching a conference tournament game after the Cavs game on Monday night. Some of these conference tournament brackets are outrageous too, by the way. But this month means big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night, every single day, right? We're going to get some early tip-offs, late night tips on the West Coast, and there's always action on the board. Right now, FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want. Rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever fits your read, whatever you see on the board that you like, you can put it into a college hoops parlay. You can mix spreads, totals, player props, and so much more to match how you see the slate playing out. Then you can apply the profit boost and instantly bump up that potential payout. So go safe, go bold, or ride with the team that you've been following all season. It's your parlay, your style, and now with more upside behind it. So head to FanDuel.com today to get started. That's FanDuel, FanDuel.com today. FanDuel, play your game. Thank you again for making this edition of Locked on Cavs your first watch on YouTube, or your first listen wherever you get your podcast. Please do me a favor and make sure you're subscribed anywhere you might be listening to Locked on Cavs. And after the game, Kenny Atkinson talked about guys battling for playoff rotation minutes, because it is a crowded room right now where the Cavs have a lot of guys that are talented. And I look at this and I do wonder what Kenny Atkinson's playoff rotation is going to look like, because I look at this roster and the Cavs have a full 15-man roster right now. I don't think all 15 guys are deserving of postseason minutes. Like, I think Naquan Tomlin, probably a break glass in case of emergency guy. Tyrese Proctor, probably not going to be in a playoff rotation. Doesn't mean anything negatively about their futures, but for right now, just probably not in the plans. But I look at this and I see a lot of guys that deserve postseason minutes. And I don't know how many guys Kenny Atkinson is going to be willing to play. Is he going to want to continue to play 10 guys? Right now, for the most part, he's only playing 9. He did play 10 guys on Monday because Craig Porter Jr. got minutes. Thomas Bryant got minutes. Those two, I don't know if they're playoff rotation guys. I would venture to guess that as of right now, if and when the Cavs are fully healthy when that time comes, those guys are on the outside looking in. But I look at this and I think, okay, you've got your big four: Donovan, James, Evan, Jarrett. They're all going to play a lot of minutes in the postseason. Then you've got your role player buckets. You've got Sam Merrill, Dean Wade, who is going to start, Jalen Tyson, Dennis Schroeder, Keon Ellis. So that puts you up to 9 guys already. And then Max Strus, Where does he fit in? Who has not played a minute for the Cavs so far this season, but I do think is close to being back. I'm not going to sit here and I wouldn't necessarily, as of right now, I've not been given any indication to think Max is going to play on Wednesday against Orlando, but could Max play within the next week or so? I don't know that that's off the table as of right now. Kenny Atkinson said on Sunday, there's like one more doctor's visit to kind of check off the list, and then it could be go time. So is that going to be enough time? But to see how he looks in to get ready for a playoff rotation. But I think of guys like Keon Ellis, and I think Keon should be in the playoff rotation because of the chaos that he creates defensively. How many minutes does Dennis Schroeder have? What does Dean Wade's role look like? I just think all of these questions are, I think, the most fascinating ones that the Cavs have for the remainder of this season, because they don't have the, and I say this, and I mean it, they don't have the luxury of being challenged the rest of the way. Like I said, that doesn't mean they're going to win the rest of their games. I would not anticipate they win the rest of their games. They're going to lose. They're going to have off nights. They're going to win more than they lose, certainly, but they're not going to be challenged against other teams. They don't play a team the rest of the season that's capable of winning the title this year. So we're not going to know who the Cavs truly are, and we're not going to know what they look like in those big moments. The thing that we're going to revert back to, for better or worse, is that game against the Boston Celtics on Sunday. And I did want to say one more thing on that one as I get out of here, because Kenny did talk about that before the game, that he didn't want to make it about just a make or miss game. And that's fair, and it's true, because the Celtics were the more forceful team. The Celtics were the better team. The Celtics won their spots. The Celtics did all the right things that the Cavs didn't do enough. But it also kind of was a make or miss game. I went back and looked at the shot quality data that I use, which I don't know it's probably not the same as the Cavs. It probably differs a little bit. And I do think it's a good thing that Kenny is saying he doesn't want to make it a make or miss thing, because that, I think, is taking accountability, which this team needs to do. They need to look at this and say this, no matter what, because they're not stupid. They know shot making plays into it, but they need to also say everything else can be better. Even if shots aren't falling, they could have been better. No doubt about that. No argument there. But via the shot quality data that I use, which is from PBP stats, and I also use Synergy too, but the PBP stats number gives a very clean expected effective field goal percentage. The Cavs it was tied for the second best number since the All-Star break against Boston. They shot roughly 10% worse than expected. That's the difference in that game. And again, it doesn't mean the Cavs don't need to be better in their spots. That's very much true. But I look at that and say, I think it's a good thing that they're taking accountability and saying they need to chase Boston. And I think it gives them the right mentality that they need to have. But I can also look here, and after having rewatched a lot of that and going back and looking at the numbers, and say they're not far off either. And I think that is actually a pretty good spot for the Cavs to be in. Now, the Cavs are back in action on Wednesday night in Orlando against the Magic. They have a day off. They flew to Florida on Tuesday late Monday night, early Tuesday morning after this game. So they will get some time. I don't know if they're going to practice on Tuesday, or they won't practice on Tuesday because they had a back-to-back, but they should be hopefully rested on Wednesday to take on a Magic team that has been playing well, hoping to catch up with Philip Rossman-Reich from Locked On Magic on Wednesday morning to preview that game. And of course, I will have another edition of Locked On Cavs coming your way on Tuesday as well. So as we get out of here, please do me a favor. Make sure that you check out the Locked On Cavs Everydayer Club. A link is in the show notes if you would like to learn more. And please subscribe to Locked On Cavs, whether you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. And if you are on YouTube, as we get out of here, the thumbs up button and the notification bell if you haven't already. I'll be back a little bit later talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.